the Formed Book Club. Catholic book lovers unpacking good books, chapter by chapter.
Welcome to the Formed Book Club. We continue to discuss Hans Bertrand Balthasar's wonderful book that we hope will be saved. There's a new cover you just saw. This book actually is two books in one, two small books. This is a German here, by Sir Verhoeven and Kleine Discours über die Hölle. And what happened was, what we're discussing now is this original book. There was a lot of controversy, resistance in Switzerland and Germany itself, just like we're having in our discussions to an extent. And then he wrote this little follow-up to it, which is in the second part of this book. So a lot of these issues that have come up, we've discussed, they'll be more finely honed and responded to in the second part of this book. What we've done now, in the first book, the initial book, we've talked about what the issue is, can we pray that everyone is saved? And then chapter 2, the New Testament, what does the Scripture say about this? And then chapter 3 was Origen and Augustine, two of the main fathers of the church, bless you, who took a different view of this. Of course, I call Origen a father of the church. He's not officially one, because after his death, he was, made a heretic by Pope after that for things that were not heretical while he said them. But anyway, Origen and Augustine are the two main figures there. And then we went to Thomas Aquinas last time. And now, chapter 5, we're going to enter into that, which has to do with the personal character of the teaching of the church on divine punishment in hell. So we're on your page 64, my page 85. Anybody's using the same book. And I'll turn it over to you two if you want to begin.
Well, I have something on 66, so if anybody beats that, then feel free to jump in.
But just before that, on 64, I just want to point out that von Balthasar states very decidedly in the middle of the page or toward the bottom, it is therefore indispensable that every individual Christian be confronted in the greatest seriousness with the possibility of his becoming lost. I don't want us to lose that affirmation of von Balthasar, lest anyone misunderstand what he is saying.
Yeah, and that's the other thing. The argument that if we were to believe that everybody is saved means that why would people be motivated to worry about damnation? I mean, we're still talking about intense suffering after death for those that die refusing the presence of God. Now, the only question is whether that's eternal and irreversible, or whether God will continue to pursue them purgatorially. But the point is, it's not as if anybody is saying, from Balthasar or anybody else, that we're all going to go directly to heaven. Do not pass go, collect $200, whatever, and we have nothing to worry about. And that's not what anybody is saying here. We should be in fear and trembling of the suffering that's due to us because of our sin after we die, irrespective of whether we're going to call that hell or purgatory.
And furthermore, it's not a matter of what we believe, it's a matter of what we hope, and they're not the same thing.
And also, it's not a matter of what happens to everybody else, but what happens to me.
Right. So he's not asserting that he believes a certain proposition. He's asking, may we hope for something?
Right. I think that's an important distinction. It's about what we can hope for, not necessarily what we can believe in. That's an important distinction. And what Father just said as well is, we should be concerned about ourselves. My first part I highlighted at the top of page 66 there, that paragraph beginning, from being personally addressed in this way, it follows that I may leave concern for the salvation of others up to divine mercy and must concentrate on my own situation before God.
Mm-hmm.
I just wrote exactum on exactly in the margin there, that basically it's not for us to judge others anyway. Judge not lest you be judged. So part of that it would feed into the argument that von Balthasar is making. But another part of it might suggest, well, why bother to make the argument at all? That if it's not for us to worry about, to concern ourselves with, except in relation to ourselves, then why are we being speculative about things we shouldn't be worried about? So that would be an argument against this book, I suppose, being written, not what's in it.
His whole point is he's criticizing those who are only concerned about what happens to others in the confidence that they themselves are not part of that damned group. That's why he's writing the book.
And also to counteract a kind of certitude of one outcome or another. As he said over and over and over again, we don't know. And hope is not the same thing as knowledge.
Yeah, I agree with that. But I must say that at the bottom of page 66, I am not comfortable with Kierkegaard here. If I can just quote what he says, and then we can discuss it. But these are Kierkegaard's words at the bottom of page 66. In my life, I have never got farther, nor will I get farther than fear and trembling. That point at which I am literally quite certain that everyone else will easily attain the bliss of heaven, and only I shall not. Telling other people you are eternally lost is something I cannot do. As far as I'm concerned, the situation is that all the others will, of course, go to heaven. The only doubt is whether I shall get there. And I think I said this last week. To me, it's a bizarre, logical statement to believe that no one's going to hell except me, which is essentially what's being said there, if I'm understanding it correctly.
Well, but one thing Balthasar is doing here is saying that, hey, my view of this is not just idiosyncratic. There's some fairly well-respected thinkers and spiritual writers and saints even that have a similar view, maybe even a more radical view than mine. And certainly Kierkegaard, who's kind of been forgotten now, I think, but I mean, he was a major force in intellectual tradition. And so for him to make and he wrote a book called Fear and Trembling, by the way, so that it's not, you may think it's, Joseph, that it's a contradictory saying, but it's contradictory in such a way that one of the great minds of the modern period made a statement, and he should be at least listened to. And Paul himself says, and I am the worst of all sinners. Well, wait a minute. Are you really the worst of all sinners? Well, Paul said he was. Was he exaggerating? Was he not telling the truth?
I think the mystery there is that the more that we receive, the more is expected of us. So if you're St. Paul, who's been given the graces, and of course beginning with a miraculous grace that he's been given, much is expected of him. So insofar as he's aware of being a sinner, that's really going to weigh heavily upon him, as I am the most unworthy because I've been given so much. So, that's the whole point about we shouldn't be sitting in judgment on others. We should be sitting in judgment ourselves. That we should be concerned with the state of our own soul and our own need for grace and our own sinfulness. And that's as far as we should really be going. And so I agree with all that. It's just the whole idea that everybody else is going to breeze their way into heaven just seems to me to be illogical, because I'm not that different from other people.
What's illogical about it?
Well, if I can go to hell, then why can't other people go to hell?
Well, but if you're the worst of sinners, it's possible logically that you're the one that goes to hell, and everyone else, being less evil than you, escapes that punishment. That's logical.
It might be possible, and I would argue it's not plausible.
No, you said it wasn't logical. I'm saying it may not be plausible, but it's logical.
Well, okay. Logic can be an idiot sometimes then.
All right. Well, you used the word. I didn't use it. I'm just saying that it fits in with the canons of logic to say that if I'm the worst of all sinners because I've got so many blessings and look what I've got, I don't know what others have, to think that I may be the only one that ends up being punished. That's not illogical. That's logical. You may say it's impossible. That's fine, but you didn't say that. So that's why.
Well, I have to correct myself and say it might not be impossible, but it's implausible.
Okay, that's good. And secondly, I want to say that I believe that Kierkegaard himself was aware of being a recipient of tremendous graces, just like Paul was. He recognized that he was given tremendous blessings by God, and therefore, what about these others that weren't? I didn't be judged. But you were going to say something. We have kind of overshouted you.
No. I think one of the things that von Balthasar does through the whole book and his other works also that I so much appreciate is how he tries to get into the heads of other people to hear what they're thinking, hear what they're saying, and see where that goes, see what that means, as like existentially, like so. Take a man like Kierkegaard, a genius, of course, an influential man, but also we'll see. If you look at his personal life, a conflicted morally.
Melancholic, yeah.
And adultery and all kinds of other things, flirtations of fascism, whatever. I'm just saying, to see the humility of the man in a statement like this. Sometimes when we're looking from the outside in on how someone else is behaving, I know I do this sometimes, like, don't they see what they're doing? Don't they see the harm that they're doing? Don't they see how bad their behavior is? Are they not contrite? Why aren't they, why don't they change? Why don't they stop doing that or whatever? And what a statement like this uncovers, I think, is the deep self-knowledge and humility that's there on the part of a sinful man, however great he might be in other areas of life. This deep humility, and I think that's all von Balthasar is doing, is kind of showing you, look at the thoughts of this very deep thinker about his own humility vis-a-vis his fellow man.
I suppose that my concern is that there seems to be a melding and blending and a conflation here of subjective opinion and objective reason. So in other words, Kierkegaard is being autobiographical and confessorial, and he's talking about his own personal feelings, about his own personal position.
Mm-hmm.
Then that's absolutely fine, but it seems to be melded in with people stating objective, defined, doctrinal things about the afterlife, and there doesn't seem to be any real demarcation line or delineation between the objective case and the subjective perspective.
Well, are you saying this, Joseph? That Kierkegaard is saying, well, I can't believe others are in hell or think they're in hell, but I can think I'm there. That's subjective. Whereas objectively, he would be saying, I know a lot of people are there, but I hope I'm not. You saying that's the objective?
Well, yeah. If someone says, I know there are people in hell, then I can see as being a statement of knowledge which we don't have. So I'm saying not necessarily subjective, but objectively flawed.
Well, what's the objective flaw in saying
to state the certainty that knowledge is something of which we do not have knowledge?
Say that again.
To state the certainty, the knowledge of something of which we do not have knowledge.
No, but he's not asserting knowledge of things.
No. I'm talking about you're talking about the people that do say, I know there are people in hell.
Well, no, but you said he was blending or melding or confusing the subjective and the objective. The subjective is, I'm afraid about myself. I can't be sure of others, but they're more likely to be in heaven than I am. You're saying that's not objective enough. To be objective, you'd have to say, I'm pretty sure that I'm not the only one going there. Plausible,
Well, I mean, I don't know that I'm going there, let alone anybody else.
Well,
so
is what you're saying, Joseph, that Balthasar's method, let's call it that. Let's call it the Balthasar method, where he, yes, there are doctrinal, dogmatic truths at issue here. But what he likes to do with those things, knowing that however we conceptualize them, define them, come up with words for them and all that, he knows that the reality is always something bigger than the word we can pin on it. So he has this way of now looking out at human experience of these things, which you're right, is the subjective side of it. There's this reality, and we human beings experience that reality subjectively. It doesn't change what the thing is. The thing is objectively what it is, but our experience of it, how we think about it, whatever, that is a subjective experience. And he does like to go there. He does like to delve into the heads of other people, what they're thinking, what they're feeling, how they perceive their experience, express their experience. He does like to look at that, and that's one of the things I love about him. Actually,
I'm not opposed to that. I'm opposed to the not clear delineation between the two approaches. So, for instance, when I give a talk on Alexander Solzhenitsyn, I tell them up front, I'm going to get the first part to be my subjective approach to Solzhenitsyn. In other words, his impact upon me and my experience of meeting him, and then the second part, Solzhenitsyn, the objective case Solzhenitsyn's importance to the 20th century, irrespective of whether I exist, right? So just making it perfectly clear that there's a subjective approach to a subject, to a topic, and there's an objective approach to a topic, and making it clear. That's the only thing I'm saying.
Right. And so are you saying that sometimes, like in this book, for example, the way he sort of just weaves through these quotes from people, because this came up in a previous chapter, remember that whoever he was, it was, he had these quotes from this guy, and he sort of left them there without a lot of comment or critique or whatever. And so you're sort of the reader sort of left with, well, okay, so what does Balthasar want us to think about that, or what does he think about it? It's not always entirely clear, is it? Is that kind of your...
Yeah, that is basically. I think that sometimes is he saying this because he agrees with it? He's just putting it into the conversation for the sake of introducing the ideas, and I don't think it's very clear in his narrative structuring of it, which is which. I mean, I think that can be a bit confusing as to where's what's Balthasar doing here? Is he advocating this stuff, or is he just presenting the evidence, so to speak, for both sides, even, right?
Right.
Well, that's good to keep our eyes on that
yes,
as we go forward.
Because it is kind of his method, and he is kind of not teasing us exactly, but he's trying to provoke us. He is.
I mean, could I, by way of trying to illustrate what I'm trying to say here, what we just read by Kierkegaard, and compare with what he quotes on page 69, in middle of page 69 by Joseph Ratzinger, right? So this is, to me, is an objective statement. In this connection, J. Ratzinger speaks of, quote, a final purification of Christology and the concept of God. Christ allocates ruin to no one. He himself is pure salvation, and whoever stands by him stands in the sphere of salvation and grace. The calamity is not imposed by him, but exists wherever man has remained distant from him. It arises through continuing to abide with oneself. And he continues immediately after that with C.S. Lewis's Great Divorce. And of course, that's Lewis's position in the Great Divorce. Also, God doesn't send anybody to hell. We are there of our own volition, and we can stay there of our own volition. Now, whether that's an eternal set in stone thing is a different discussion. But to me, that statement by Ratzinger is a purely objective, doctrinal approach to the issue, with which I have absolutely no problems whatsoever, because it's logical as well as being theological. I do think I mean logical correctly this time, Father.
Right. But Balthasar is also talking about what our attitudes should be subjectively about our own salvation and the salvation of others. I mean, it's a subjective attitude, but it's about what we consider objective reality. To go back to the Kierkegaard quote, the first part, he says, this is on page 64, something like that.
66.
66. I'll mark that down here.
What's the bottom?
Okay. I find it literally quite certain, what's he certain about? That every other person will easily be blessed. Not that they will be blessed, but it'll be easy for them to, only I will not. So that to me is objective. I mean, it's a subjective feeling, but it's a feeling about objective reality there.
There's also, it appears, Father, you have a different translation of Kierkegaard there from the one in this one as well.
Okay, and then, I don't know why this translation is different, but anyway, Then on your side, Joseph, to continue, to say to others, you're eternally lost, that I cannot do. Okay, the Balthasar is okay for that. For me, here's the subjective part. The situation remains constantly this. All the others will be blessed. That is certain enough. Only with me, there will be difficulties. I think that's the subjective part you're talking with Joseph, and that's another kind of certitude that they're all blessed except him, And that's
but again, it's further. That's not quite as bad as this translation. It says the situation that all the others will, of course, go to heaven. Well, that's not the same as they will easily be blessed. I mean, it's.
But wait a second. I've got two sentences here. Or I find it literally quite certain that every other person will easily be blessed, only I will not. Period. Next sentence. To say to the others, you are eternally lost, that I cannot do. Next sentence. For me, it remains constantly this, all others will be blessed, that is certain enough. So, first sentence is, I believe it's easier for them than it will be for me. The third sentence is, I'm certain that everyone else will be blessed. That's the part I think that you're.
Well, yeah, but I said, give me some example about how different the translations are. You've got for me, comma, this is as far as I'm concerned, comma, and then you've got all the others will be easily blessed, and we've got all the others will, of course, go to heaven. I mean, they're being blessed and going to heaven. I mean, not the same thing.
I've got two sentences. You've got one sentence. It looks like.
No, here. It's.
Well, I know, but the beginning. I find it literally quite certain that every other person will easily be blessed, only I will not. That's one sentence.
Mm-hmm.
Is that in there?
Not like that. Easily attain the bliss of heaven.
Only I shall not. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Then after that, for me.
That's as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. That it's certain that only with me there may be difficulty. So there's two different statements there.
And by the way, he's saying only with me there may be difficulties.
Yeah.
May. I mean, certain and may. I mean, that's kind of, but again, I mean, Balthasar is simply showing you the inner turmoil of a sinful man. And it's not to be poured over as if it's a statement of dogma or doctrine or anything else. It's a man's own inner turmoil being put on display, and I think Balthasar is simply using it to illustrate that a posture of certitude is not about ourselves vis-a-vis other people, is not the posture of the Christian. That's all.
No, I agree with that. I do find that the radical difference in translation
is
somewhat disturbing, because it alters the meaning.
It does. You're right.
But it's scary in a broader sense. It's scary. It just shows what a translator can do with a text.
Yep.
How it can be spun. There's just a little bit of, should we say, poetic license in the translation.
Well, that's why when I was in a reading group some years ago, I was in it for several years, and we met every week. And we were reading the works of Dante and then others, and then going back to Divine Comedy. We read 3 different translations of the Divine Comedy in the course of that study group, and they were very different from each other.
Yeah.
And so, a translation is an art, and it's tricky.
Well,
for those of us that aren't polyglots, and I'm certainly one of those, that's why when I'm reading Homer or Virgil or Dante, I try to actually become have some sort of knowledge of several different translations, because I can't go back to the original. At least if you're approaching it from different angles, you can see, you pull that together, you got a real idea of what Homer must have said, right?
And then to make the group even more fun, we had some native Italian speakers who brought their own. Well, I would have translated the word this way, so it was, and yet that can sound very disconcerting, right? On one level. And yet on another level, what you realized was that all of these, again, the reality, the thing that we're trying to get at, it's there all right. But the fullness of the thing, no one person can grasp. And so it was it was
And if it's true of a work of literature, albeit a great one, it's obviously true of the cosmos all the more, right?
Right. It's because the literature is simply a window into the cosmos. So,
Right.
or in human experience and so on. Anyway, so it can be, at first it's sort of a disconcerting thing, but then you realize, yeah, but the reality is in fact there that we're all looking at. And let's just enrich our experience by hearing different ways to express the same thing. Anyway.
Okay, Kierkegaard, I presume, wrote in Danish.
Oh, that's right. He's Danish.
Mhm.
Danish. That was a joke.
I mean, this is the German from which our two translations came.
Aha.
Now, I'll give you the literal translation of this in the German that we've got.
Aha.
So, for me, it's literally, buchstäblich, entirely certain that everyone else with ease, Leichtigkeit, will be blessed, only not me. To say that you're eternally lost, I can't do that. So that's that first sentence, we agree on.
Mm-hmm.
The second or the third sentence, there's, for me, the situation remains this. All the others, they will certainly be blessed. But schon selig, not quite certainly, but they'll of course be blessed. That's certain. That's certain enough. He doesn't say certain, but certain enough. It's kind of a little bit hedged there, Only with me may there be some Misslichkeit, some difficulty, some obstacle, whatever. So,
but see, but the word Himmel is not in there at all, right?
No, it's selig, being blessed.
Yeah, because I mean the word heaven is used twice in the translation we've got.
So interesting. And then knowing just a little bit this, if I'm thinking of the right man, a long-standing adulterous situation, and when you know what you're doing is wrong and that you should repent, but you just won't, at least not right now.
Yeah.
Then for sure you just might realize you're going to have a more difficult time than others to be taken to the place you need to go to let go of that thing you love more than God. Quite frankly, I mean, there's a kind of honesty here, a very raw honesty of a man struggling with himself. I find it very refreshing myself, but
I get it. I wasn't suggesting otherwise. I was just the blurring of the two was just confusing me.
Mm-hmm.
I want to make an incidental remark, namely that I am very encouraged when I find out that what I underlined, you two also underlined.
Mm-hmm.
I'm 2 for 2 so far.
Yes.
And going forward.
Well, I have a quibble with his reading of The Great Divorce. So just below the quote by Ratzinger, that I quote from page 69, and then he introduces The Great Divorce immediately afterwards. Then he summarizes it. He says that the conversations that are happening in the book usually in such a way end as to entail that the conversation. So usually in such a way as to entail that the conversation ends with no clear result. And I mean, with the exception of the one who has the lizard on his shoulder that appears to actually acquiesce with the killing of the lust, basically, all the others of their own volition get back on the bus. I mean, there's no equivocation with all except one. There's no equivocation by Lewis about this.
I think what he means, though, is, if I'm remembering it well enough, it's been a long time since I read it. I was wondering if we should read it together for this group. It's so good. But
I love it. Yeah.
I thought it leaves open that the bus is going to come for them again. They're going to have other chances to, they can go back and forth on this bus several times, was my understanding.
Well, yeah, that may be the case, but the point is that these conversations all ended definitively, with one exception, with them choosing to get back on the bus. I mean, so there's not sort of any equivocation on Lewis's part as regards what's being decided here. I mean, whether it's an eternal decision is another matter, but they do decide definitively to get back on the bus and go back to wherever it is.
Yes, but I think you could read the word result here in more than one way. That this conversation, this was the round of the conversation that we were being able to listen to, but that conversation could very well resume because their fate has not yet been decided. So I think
we can't read into Lewis's text what's not there.
no, I'm not reading something that's not there because again, it was a long time ago, but my memory is that these people have gone back and forth on this bus more than once. They go back and forth on this bus more than once.
That's not made clear in it at all, actually, one way or the other.
Okay, I'll have
Only one bus journey is mentioned. You get the impression that this angelic bus does arrive occasionally. People have the opportunity to catch it. How often, how many go back a second time is just not mentioned. So I mean,
All right. Well, that's all the more reason for me to reread it because that certainly was my impression that the case was not closed on these people quite yet. But maybe I'm wrong.
I don't think Lewis definitively throws them in hell, but he does basically. The point he's making is if you absolutely resolutely refuse the will of God, you will have hell because that's the only alternative to not having God.
Right. When these
really
people
saying.
refuse to carry on into heaven, they get back on the bus and go back. I'm totally agreeing with you about that. So at that moment, that mercy is being refused. That's very clear.
Yeah.
I just had this other impression, which could be mistaken. But that what the main point is that Lewis reveals that that every love has to pass through the path of purification. Every love, even mother's love, even things that we put on these sentimental high pillars, every love, every earthly love has to be purified. And the genius of the book is that he shows these different characters and how the path of purification is slightly different for each one. And everyone can find himself in this story, right? I mean, just like in Dante's Purgatory, we can all find ourselves. So hopefully not in his hell, but we could. So anyway, that's the genius of the book, and I highly recommend that people read it.
Okay.
Well, I'm just going to point out if Thomas has done it already that we're beyond our 30 minutes as we stand.
I'm looking for the German here, but I found it. But in English, what he's saying here on 69, I think it's the bottom, whatever, 70.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Through constantly new imaginary conversations, the standpoints of heavenly love and hellish egotism confront each other in some particular context, usually in such a way that as to entail the conversation ends with no clear result, but at times in a way leading to discovery in the egotism of an opening. So in a certain sense, by clear result, I think he means success, that we've penetrated the egotism, because he's saying at times it leads to discovery in the egotism, an opening through which it can be linked to love, to the path of purification, triggered and entered upon.
Yes.
So, but
I think only in one instance. I mean, it's there. The one instance is there, but it's not a general rule. It's an exception to the rule.
Okay. Well, let's close it here. But for the next session, I'll check the German and see exactly what the German says. Now, I'm getting concerned about this translation. So we'll see you all next session. God bless you all.
If you enjoyed this discussion, please help spread the word about the Forum Book Club by subscribing to the podcast and writing a review. You can sign up for weekly updates at formedbookclub.ignatius.com.